Hello my friends, this is Amner Hunter from amnerhunter.com. Happy to spend some time with you on this video. This time around I wanna check out and test 30 plugins by the company Kilohearts that are available for free. This package of plugins, it's called Kilohearts Essentials, and it contains 30 plugins that recently were updated to the version 2, and Kilohearts is giving away the full bundle. In these tools you will find equalizers, dynamic processors, also modulation effects such as flanging, chorusing, space effects like delays, chorus, and also some pretty cool distortion plugins, filters, all sorts of tools for music production. In this video I will talk briefly and explain briefly about each tool, and also I am gonna use this plugin in some elements in a mix so you can check out how they sound. As usual, all of the applicable links are going to be down below in the description and first comment, and don't forget to check out the timestamps as well that I leave you down below. Before we dive deep into the content, my friends, I would like to invite you to my website amnerhunter.com, where you can get some additional freebies. I have some free PDF guides and ebooks for music producers, such as the guide on how to make more music in 30 to 60 minutes a day, also the 8-step mixing checklist using only free plugins, and the #1 rule and law of home recording studio. Additionally, I have some free tools such as a huge collection of guitar impulses, a drum sample pack for rock and metal sound, among other utilities. And finally, don't forget to check out my blog and this channel, which I'm updating weekly with tons of free content. So now let's get straight to the video. Let's start here with this simple 3-band equalizer. This one has low, mids, and high frequencies. You can adjust the different frequency ranges here. For instance, the lows to be from 109 Hertz and below, all the mid area from 109 up to 2.20 kilohertz, and the high frequencies, right? You can adjust this crossover and you can boost each one of these frequency sections or cut them as well. You have interesting presets here if you click here. Let's take a listen on this full mix. The next plugin on the list, it's the Bitcrush. This one, it will create a distortion effect that sounds like an analog radio or other lo-fi devices. It will add to the audio this low fidelity quality to it. It will degrade the audio and you're gonna be lowering the bits of the audio, also adding noise with the dither option. This control will determine the quality from analog to digital, and this one from digital to analog. You have a mix knob as well for that parallel control. Let's take a listen. The next one on the list, it's the chorus that enhances the stereo presence of a signal. It basically creates a version of itself and it delays that signal a bit. You have the delay, depth, rate, as usual in other chorus effects. You have the number of chorus voices right here. You can spread the signal and more stereo or bring it to mono, and you have a mix knob control as well. You have pretty interesting presets here to choose from. Let's take a listen. The next plugin on the list, it's the Formant Filter, which basically will also combine a version of the same audio and it will delay it a bit, creating this interesting filter that sounds like out of phase. You have the polarity control to set it as plus or minus and negative. The stereo functionality flips the polarity setting for the right channel. The mix knob control. Here you can also choose the frequency where the filtering it's happening. Let's take a listen. The next plugin on the list, it's the compressor that will even out all of the peaks, right? It will control the dynamics. It can add more punch to any signal, or it also can add more sustain. I like to test them on drums mostly. You have the usual controls, threshold, ratio, attack, release. The compressor can also measure the loudness in terms of RMS, which is the average loudness, then only in peaks or in fast. Fast, it will react quicker to the transients and peaks depending on what you want to achieve. You have also sidechain option here. Let's test this compressor on these drums. Next, we have a delay plugin to basically add repetitions of the same signal across a length of time. You have here the milliseconds of the repeats. You can also sync the delays to the tempo of your project on your DAW. You have the feedback, the ping pong that will give you this stereo delay effect. The echoes are gonna be rebounding from left to right. The dock like compression on the delays, the panning, and the mix control. You have also some very interesting presets here for docking, mono, and ping pong. Let's take a listen. Next up, we have the distortion. This one will add distortion and saturation in 6 different ways: overdrive, saturate, fold back, sine, hard clip, and quantize. You have here the amount of drive, the dynamics. Spread will add different amounts of the signal to the left and right channels. DC filter and bias will fix any waveforms that are not symmetrical, and the mix control. You have also this visual interface here. Let's take a listen. Then we move on with the Dynamics plugin. This one includes upward and downwards compressor. That means that it will also compress from the bottom up of the signal, not only from the peaks down, all right? With upwards compression, you can add a ton of details because it will bring up the valleys of the signal. Here in the visual interface, you are gonna be moving this to set the threshold of the upwards and downwards compression. You have the usual controls: attack, release, knee, in and out gain, and the mix control. You have also pretty interesting presets here. Let's test the differences between upwards and downwards compression. Next plugin on the list, it's the Ensemble that will provide more versions of the original signal, providing a fuller sound. It will use delay, it will use pitch shifting also, and phase changes in the signal to provide this full sound. You have the detune option to change the pitch, the spread that will open up the stereo spectrum, and the mix control. You have also some different types of parameters: random, symmetric, or sine wave. Let's take a listen on this full mix. Next plugin on the list, it's the filter. This one, it's just that. It's to filter out or remove frequencies that we don't want. You have the option of low pass filter, also high pass filter, band pass, notch, low shelf, peak, and also high shelf. You have the cutoff frequency here, and you have the Q control. And you have the filter slope here that will put, for instance, here to X or 4X, for instance. So now let's use these filters in a full mix. The next plugin is a flanger. This one also mixes the original audio with a delayed signal of itself, and it will give you this very cool modulation sound that will change the waveforms and the phase of the waveforms. You have the delay function here, depth, rate. This one enables or disables the phase offset, the differences between the two signals, the spread for a more open signal in the stereo spectrum, feedback, and mix control. Very useful. You have also some very interesting presets. Let's take a listen. The next plugin is the Formant Filter that will boost two frequencies, like it says here, to mimic the sound of different vowels. You have this control in the center that you can use to manipulate the sound. You have the lows and highs, which are the two frequencies that this plugin is going to be manipulating. This control adjusts how powerful and narrow the frequency boost is. Let's take a listen. Next one, we have the frequency shifter that will shift all of the frequencies up or down. By right-clicking, you are able to write the frequency that you are going to be affecting. Let's take a listen. Next plugin on the list, it's the gain. This one will increase or decrease the volume of the signal in terms of decibels or also in terms of percentage. Here it will display the current output level. By using your mouse, you can increase or decrease the amount of decibels. Double click and it resets by default. Let's take a listen. Next, we have this gate that will prevent any noise floor when the signal crosses the threshold that we set here. It will close the gate, meaning that nothing will pass through that. It's very useful, for instance, in noisy guitars. Also, you have the attack, release, and hold to be able to shape further the gate, how quickly or slowly it closes and opens. It has the look ahead function. It will react quicker. If you click here, flip, it will reverse the effect of the gate. It also has a sidechain option. Let's take a listen on these noisy guitars. Next plugin, it's the Haas effect that will delay the left and right channels, and by consequence it will widen the signal. It has only two controls, the delay time and also the left or right channel, choosing the one that you are delaying. Let's take a listen. Next plugin, it's the ladder filter that emulates and simulates high-pass and low-pass filters found in physical gear or outboard gear. This has the cutoff frequency, resonance. It also adds saturation. You can increase the drive, the bias that simulates the voltage of the components in analog. You have two modes, transistor and diode. Let's take a listen. The next plugin in the list, it's the limiter. This one will help you to prevent any peaks from passing the threshold that you set here. It will also increment the loudness of any track for mastering. The threshold will determine the maximum volume of the audio, right? By increasing the input, the signal, it's gonna be hitting the wall of the threshold, right? Therefore limiting the audio. So now let's bring up the loudness of this track. I'm gonna set here a -0.1 decibel threshold. Next, we have the Nonlinear Filter. This filter will color and distort the signal using nonlinearities that are also found in analog gear, where you don't exactly know how the signal behaves, right? It's not linear like in digital. So you have the cutoff frequency, the different types of bands here. You can also saturate in different ways. Let's take a listen. Next up, we have the phase distortion that will distort the signal by offsetting the phases of individual harmonics. You have the drive and the normalize button, making the effect insensitive to the input gain, the tone that filters the modulation, bias that adds a constant phase offset, spread, left and right channels, and the mix knob. You also have sidechain option. Let's take a listen. Next, we have the phaser, which is a modulation effect. It will filter the input signal, creating a series of moving peaks and troughs in the audio spectrum. You have the usual controls of a modulation effects like the rate, the depth, also the spread, the mix control, the cutoff frequency. This order control will put the phaser in a more exaggerated way. Let's take a listen. Next plugin on the list, it's the pitch shifter. This will adjust the pitch up or down of the input signal. With your mouse, you can increase or decrease the pitch. If you disable this correlate function, you are gonna be able to use that jitter. That means the randomness in the effect of the pitch shifter. You have the grain size, the mix control, and the compensation, which is the amount of latency in the pitched signal, low or high. Let's take a listen to this plugin on a lead guitar. Next, we have the Resonator that will add harmonics resonances to the input signal. You have the decay, the intensity, and the mix control. You can also alter the shape of the harmonics here. This one resonates on all harmonics and this one on odd harmonics. Next up, we have the Reverb plugin that emulates the sound rebounding in a room. You're gonna determine the size of the room. Dampen was created for the decay of the signal faster. You have the decay control with the early and late reflections here and the mix control. You have also some pretty interesting presets here. Let's take a listen. Next plugin is the reverser that will delay different parts of the input signal and will combine it with the original signal, and it will reverse that delayed signal. You can also use milliseconds here, or you can sync it to your project's tempo. You have the crossfade and the mix control. You have also some cool presets to choose from. Let's take a listen on these drums. The next one, it's the ring mod. This one modulates the input of the signal with a signal generator or with a secondary input signal. You have the bias rectify here to change the waveforms like this, negative and positive, the mix control, the frequencies that will determine the shape of the waveforms, right, longer or shorter, and the spread for a more stereo sound. You have some types of waveforms here. Let's take a listen. Next, the plugin will widen the stereo spectrum of any mono signal, for instance, or it can also collapse a stereo signal to mono. You have here the gain of the mono content, you have here the width of the signal, and the panning knob left and right. Here you're gonna see also the correlation between the left and right channels. Let's take a listen. Next up, we have the tape stop plugin that simulates the sound of slowly stopping and starting a playing tape. It will give you this very cool, interesting effect of rewinding a tape and slowing it down with the stop time knob and the start time. Let's take a listen. Next up, we have the Trance Gate plugin that will modulate the sound depending on a rhythmic gate. You can increase or decrease the number of gates that are gonna be used. You can also switch between different patterns, and you have here the ADSR, right? Attack, decay, sustain, and release time. Here you can choose the different times of the gates, and you have a mix knob control. Let's take a listen on these drums. And finally, we have the Transient Shaper that will shape the attack and sustain of any given signal. It will change the dynamics, the relationship between the peaks and between the tails of any signal. It can also clip the audio. You can change the speed. Quicker speed result in a more punchy sound, and lower speeds result in a more smooth sound. You have this visual interface where you're gonna be able to see the effect in action. Let's take a listen on these drums. Please let me know down below in the comments, my friends, what are your thoughts on this bundle by Kilohearts? Are you excited to try them? Do you have any favorites out of these 30 plugins? I think you can find some pretty interesting tools in this package. Before we go, I would like to invite you one more time to my website, amnorhunter.com, where you can get some additional freebies, some free PDF guides and ebooks for music producers and guitar players. Also, some tools such as a huge collection of guitar impulses, a new drum sample pack for rock and metal sound, among all the utilities. And finally, don't forget to check out my blog and this channel, which I'm updating weekly with tons of free content. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it. I will see you very soon on the next one. All right? Take care.